The culture is run by minds, AI constructs of immense computing power, some of the greatest intelligences in the galaxy. But no amount of intelligence can prevent you from making mistakes. The sixth novel in the Culture series by Iain M. Banks, Look to Windward, was first published in 2000. It deals with the effects of mistakes made by the minds and the long shadow of war. As part of Banks's extended examination of the topic of intervention, it particularly focuses on an attempt to mould the future of a race of cat-like aliens, which resulted in disaster. The Chelgrians were plunged into a brief but appalling civil war. Now, the culture may be about to feel the consequences. "800 years ago, two stars and all the lives they supported were abruptly destroyed during the course of a single battle. 8 centuries later, the light of these ancient mistakes is about to reach Massac Orbital, a culture ringworld that supports billions of lives of its own. Several particular individuals are gathered there, each with their own connection to the old war. Past battles cast long shadows, and Massac may be about to undergo a tragic disaster of its own." Look to Windward is the sixth culture novel by Iain M. Banks, the last one before a long 8-year hiatus. In part a very loose sequel to Consider Phlebas from 1987, the novel explores some consequences of the Aedean War. More generally, Banks examines the lingering effects of war on individuals and societies, as well as the topics of hedonism, loss, duty, and sacrifice. This is also the closest look yet at a culture orbital, and the immensely capable AI mind entrusted with its care. Look to Windward is the final novel of the second phase of the Culture series. A successor to Accession in 1996 and Inversions from 1998, it was followed by a long hiatus. During that period, Banks published a non-Culture SF novel, The Algebraist in 2004, 2 non-SF novels, and a work of non-fiction. The bulk of Look to Windward is set on Massac, a culture orbital. A vast loop in space, it is 100 million kilometers long and 6,000 kilometers wide. This slender bracelet of a world orbits the volatile star La Salere and houses 50 billion culture citizens. The novel focuses primarily not on citizens, but rather guests on Massac, 3 in particular. Cabe is an affable member of the Homondan species, which for a time fought against the culture during the Aedean War. The only one of his people on the orbital, his body obeys its own rule of threes. Around 3 meters tall, Cabe is pyramid-shaped and has 3 arms, legs, and ears. Marai Zilla is a Chelgrian, a member of an intelligent cat-like species. A brilliant composer, he is also a political dissident, exiled from Chel due to his incendiary caste denier beliefs. Angry and reclusive, he lives in relative isolation. Tabilo Quillan is also a Chelgrian, a former soldier who lost his wife during Chel's vicious caste war and became a monk in peacetime. He's sent by the government on Chel to visit Massac, ostensibly to convince Zilla to return home. These characters become linked in a complex dance of plot. E.H. Tersono, a culture drone, is keen for Quillan and Zilla to meet, and recruits Cabe to try to make this happen. Zilla is determined to avoid this, and instead spends time with an avatar or personification of the mind which operates and maintains Massac. The mind, for its part, has commissioned Zilla to compose an epic piece of music to commemorate the tragic destruction of the 2 stars during the Aedean War 800 years earlier. Zilla's work may produce an immortal masterpiece, and the commemoration promises to be an unforgettable event. What very few people realise is that Quillan has a secret mission, initially unknown even to him, that poses a deadly threat to the survival of Massac itself. Look to Windward is ultimately about the long-term effects of 2 very different wars, and how they've damaged and warped not just individuals, but whole societies. On the one hand, there is the Adiran War, a vast interstellar conflict in which the culture eventually triumphed over another involved species with expansionist goals. Only a very small episode of this conflict was depicted in Consider Phlebas. The caste war on Chel was a conflict of a different order. Taking only around 50 days, it caused the death of 4.5 billion Chelgrians. The war was the fault of the culture, as it was triggered by a flawed attempt at engineering Chelgrian society concocted by the culture's minds. Banks explores how these conflicts affected various societies and characters. Major Quillen is grief-stricken following the loss of his wife in the caste war, and begins to attach little or no value to his own life. This makes him an attractive tool for a particular faction on Chel. By contrast, Marai Zilla is able to remain aloof and reclusive, in part because he left Chel before the caste war began. The mind of Massac Orbital was formally installed in the aptly named Lasting Damage, a vast culture vessel with a traumatic service history during the Adiran War. The resolution to the intricate plot of Look to Windward is also the resolution of the various traumas of these characters. The novel asks what sacrifices are necessary to break a cycle of deadly violence, which on the galactic scale of the culture has lasted the better part of 1,000 years. One aspect of Look to Windward which makes it so effective is Banks's vivid description of Massac Orbital. Previous novels had offered some glimpses of ordinary life in the culture. These include Gurgay's social scene on Shyark Orbital in the opening section of The Player of Games, and Zakalway's brief time on a General Systems vehicle in Use of Weapons. But it's this novel which makes clear the sheer scale of an orbital, and better explores the decadent lives of its inhabitants. Banks's description of the Great River, which winds its way around the entire orbital with no beginning and no end, is one of the loveliest passages in the series up to this point. Look to Windward is a superb entry in the Culture series, which picks up and runs with several elements established in earlier volumes. As well as a rich and witty exploration of life in the culture, it's also a sometimes moving meditation on interventionism, trauma, and the long shadow of war. Thanks for listening. For more classic science fiction reviews, visit andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find the show on YouTube and follow updates on Blue Sky. In both cases, just search Classic SF with Andy Johnson. Finally, to get in touch, use the contact form on my site or hit the link in the episode description to send a text message.